So, Paul, we had an exciting event happen to us my goodness, this is nearly 22 years ago now.
Yeah.
April 1st, 1999. We are out there playing wiffle ball in the front yard at our parents' house in Illinois. I think I was in 7th grade then, so that would have put you 4th grade?
4th grade, yeah.
4th grade, I think, yeah. This guy drives up in an old brown car, hops out, and you remember what he says, right?
Yeah. Hey, you fellers, any of you see one of them emus? Big bird, about yay big?
Yeah, and no, we had not. But I mean, people in our area were raising emus at that time, so not too ridiculous to we saw them all the time. So one got out.
But when he left, we burst into laughter.
Yeah, and then a few minutes later, after he speeds off, we look out across the wheat field on the other side of Illinois 127. And there it is, the emu. He is free. He is running away from the farm, and just having a great time, enjoying his freedom. And we just burst out laughing because we knew no one's ever going to believe this story.
No one's going to believe us. No,
believe us. And so we should have gone and gotten mom and dad right away to show them. We didn't.
We were playing wiffle ball.
We were playing wiffle ball, right? So we go back in the house, and we're just laughing and laughing and laughing. And they wouldn't believe us because, well, it was
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day, right? So we went, Dad, there's an emu in the field. And no, good one, guys. Ha, ha, ha. Very funny. No, it was really there. Really there. Good thing we had corroborating eyewitnesses, right?
Exactly, yeah. We other people heard about it. We talked about it.
Other people saw it. We heard that other people tried to write it, although that part of the story may not be, but other people definitely heard about it and saw it.
And I put it up on Facebook a few years ago, saying, "Hey, does anyone remember this?" And all these people, yeah, we remember it. One girl was like, "I went to my grandpa's house so we could try to see it, and we couldn't find it, but we knew it was there." And so over the years, we've had this story, teaching middle schoolers about the resurrection account. It's something I always bring up, and I know you use it to talk to your confirmation, put in a sermon too. Mm-hmm. And
we frame it as okay, can you tell this story is true or not? And there's details in it that you can tell. I mean, we're the eyewitnesses. We're talking about it, and even though it's not something that you would just imagine and make up, this is something that happened. Now, I mean, of course, does that mean anything that we saw an emu 21 years ago or 22 years ago now?
Yeah. No. And I think in telling our story, sometimes we might tell it a little bit differently. Like I think I say I remember the guy driving a truck. I remember the emu walking up, running. We've had a disagreement about how long the wheat in the field was.
It was short. It was April.
It was at least 6 years long. I talked to Dean Sprague. But anyway, those are very small details in the story that we might disagree about. The big picture that there was an emu walking around New Minden was true and verifiable.
That is true and verifiable. Hey, we got something else that's true and verifiable, and we've got eyewitness evidence of here today, and that is Jesus' resurrection. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Help I'm Teaching Sunday School. I'm here once again with Paul. Paul, thank you for joining us today. Again, we're going to talk through Matthew chapter 28, where Jesus rises from the dead.
Great to be here, and even greater that this is a real thing that really happened so that we can have eternal life.
Yeah, let's get to it. All right, you want odds or evens today? What do you want?
I'll take evens.
Evens. Okay, I'll go with verse 1 then. All right, so We're going to go through Matthew 28, verses 1 through 15, which is the resurrection and also the report of the guard, because that's really interesting. So, verse 1 says this: Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Okay, so this is Sunday morning. Sabbath is past, and they rested on the Sabbath. Which that in itself is kind of interesting, that you're supposed to rest on the Sabbath. And what does Jesus do on the Sabbath? He's dead. His body does nothing. He completely fulfills the Sabbath for us by his rest in the tomb. And by his rest in the tomb, he also makes the graves, our graves, a holy place too. Jesus has been there, so it's okay for us to go there too, to wait for the resurrection just as he did. But anyway, so we got Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. We were introduced to them back in the last chapter in 27 verse 61. We see that they are there when Jesus is buried. And then even earlier than that, we have Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. That's probably this Mary too. And we said last time that James and Joseph, those are names of Jesus' brothers also. So, is this Jesus' mother? It may very well be.
It might have been. And it doesn't say, and Matthew didn't say, hey, this is Jesus' mom, by the way, because Matthew is mentioning people that his audience would have known. He says, hey, these guys that it's their mom.
Yeah. So they're mentioned here. They've seen this where Jesus is buried, and now they're coming back to the tomb basically to finish the job of burying him. They weren't able to do that all before the sun got down on Friday, before the Sabbath began. And so they're coming back to finish the job of putting spices on his body, assuming that he's going to rot and decay, and they don't want him to smell too bad while he does that.
And this was of course, in the Jewish culture, you couldn't do work on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So that's why they had to wait. Yeah.
Now, I think that it's interesting. Okay, so Sunday morning, we know that from the last chapter, Jesus died at 3:00 on Friday afternoon. Okay, from 3:00 on Friday afternoon to about 7:00 on Sunday morning, that's 40 hours. That's a number that comes up all the time in biblical counting, but it's about 40 hours that Jesus is dead. It's on 3 days, so they would count it kind of inclusive counting as, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even though it's like the end of Friday through the beginning of Sunday.
Yeah, I remember when I would plan class trips to Washington, D.C. or something, it's a 3-day trip, but we're leaving Sunday night and getting back, Friday morning or Saturday morning or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. So let's go on and see what happens as they go to the tomb.
Verse 2, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. So right here, there is an angel, a messenger from God, rolls the stone away and sits on it. It doesn't say for sure if the stone, usually you picture it kind of like a disc shape. So we don't know if the disc fell over or if it stayed up and the angel sitting up here. We don't know exactly, but it's not important.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that we don't actually get a description of what happened, what it was like the moment that Jesus' lifeless body came back to life again.
Well, I think that's important, though, because this is from the eyewitness perspective that we're hearing this. And no one was in the tomb with Jesus besides Jesus. You get to see how it happens from the outside perspective of the tomb.
Yeah. And so this, once again, God is employing his angels to do his work of bringing a message to people. Just like at Christmas, nobody would have known the awesome thing that had happened unless God sent the angels to the shepherds. Here now, God is sending one of his angel messengers again to clearly proclaim what has taken place so that people will know. Even before they run into Jesus, who is now risen from the dead, we'll already give them the heads up. Hey, here's what happened. And that's what we're going to see happening here in the next couple of verses. All right, so verse 3. Talking about the angel, it says, his appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow. We're from the Midwest. We enjoy watching a good lightning show as it comes closer, right? But if that comes too close, that's not good. Lightning is terrifying, and that's kind of what we're going to see here. This is one of the great descriptions we have of angels, is that they're bright, they're shining, and terrifying
and powerful, right?
Absolutely powerful. We're going to get that in the next verse.
Yeah. Verse 4, and for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. Wow, this is to put yourself in the place of these guards. They're probably Roman soldiers. It's hard to tell exactly what Pilate says is here. Take a guard that we read in the last episode there, but it's probably the Roman guys there guarding, and probably thinking, hey, this is regarding a dead guy. I mean,
easy, right?
Yeah. And then the most powerful thing they've ever seen shows up. And the Romans are used to be the most powerful thing around, and they are afraid.
You're going up against an angel, you're going to lose every time. I mean, they have God's power with them, and all the angel doesn't even have to like say anything. He just shows up and shines, and there the guards are like dead men.
Yeah.
All right. Verse 5 then. Now this is an interesting contrast. Okay, so but the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. So the women, they don't fall over like dead men. The angel's got good news for them, right? So you're afraid. Why are you afraid? Well, I mean, there's two reasons. I mean, if you came to any grave and you found that it was open all of a sudden, and the person was gone, you'd be afraid.
Yeah. And the women might not have known if they were soldiers or not. They'd set up after they saw him be put in the tomb, so they might be afraid of that. Then all of a sudden they're there. We don't know what type of if there was dialogue between the soldiers and the women before this happened too.
Mm-hmm. But this is the first thing that angels always have to say, isn't it? Right? Don't be afraid, and because hey, bright shiny angel who just knocked out Roman soldiers. He's not here to scare you. He's got good news for you, and he knows their mission. Right? I know that you seek Jesus who is crucified. This is great because actually, this now becomes part of Jesus' identity. The risen Christ has this as part of who he is. He is the one who was crucified. This Revelation is later going to say he is the Lamb who was slain, but now he lives. Jesus, who used to be crucified, who still kind of is, bears those marks on his body of being crucified. This is now part of who he is. Jesus, the crucified one, but the risen one, then here too. Verse 6.
The angel continues saying, he is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Yeah, so the angels reminded, ladies, remember, he said he was going to do this. Even Jesus' enemies remembered that he had said that, but Jesus' disciples, and including the women that followed him, they are distraught and not remembering that seemingly. And so he says, come, take a look, see where he was.
Yeah. Luke adds this nice little detail here where he says the women remembered his words. You're like, oh yeah, he did say that, didn't he? And then here's the proof, right? Come see the place where he lay. And it's John who talks about the grave clothes being folded up neatly. Jesus is God. God is a God of order, not chaos and confusion. So even before Jesus leaves the tomb, he folds everything up nicely and neatly and walks away.
And that's the kind of detail an eyewitness would add that you wouldn't add if you were making up a story.
Mm-hmm. Everything's folded up neatly and put away. Grave robbers don't do that. The grave clothes are left there. It's clear that the body has gone out of it, and here he is. Come check it out. Come see the place where he lay. And there's more to it. The angel is continuing on, saying this in verse 7. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. And this is actually going to be an interesting thing. Where are the disciples in all of this? John and Luke tell us that Peter and John go to the tomb later that morning once the women come back and tell them. But since late Thursday night, most of the disciples have been hiding together in a locked room, and Jesus is going to appear to them later that night. But they're terrified.
Yeah.
They're afraid that what happened to Jesus is going to happen to them. So here now, there's good news for these disciples who have run away and been terrified that Jesus is going to see you again. And this is something that Jesus told them also. It was back in chapter 26 when they were in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus says, "But after I'm raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." So again, Jesus said this already. And so do what Jesus said. And what he said is going to come true. Him rising from the dead, meeting you in Galilee. That's going to be where you guys get to spend some good time together before he ascends into heaven.
Yeah. And it's comforting too that Jesus has an instruction to go to Galilee, but he still shows up to see the disciples later that night
In
Jerusalem, because they need it.
They need it.
They need it.
They need it a lot. Yeah. Verse 8.
So they departed quickly. That's the women, of course, from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. So they're. I'm like, when something crazy happens that that I'm going to remember this for the rest of your life, especially if it's a scary thing, kind of, or could be scary, you remember that adrenaline that you have. So there's still that, probably that they have, and they still haven't seen Jesus. They're probably a little confused. I mean, the angel told them, but it's an angel telling you something. That's not a normal thing. So they go and they tell the disciples.
So there's fear here still, right? But there's also now with that there's joy.
Yeah.
There's joy because they've heard this good news, and already just hearing this good news, even before they see Jesus, that's already created joy for them. They're already the fear is starting to melt away. There's fear still there, but there's joy there now with it too. This is amazing. Okay, you remember the movie Inside Out, where you have the different emotions?
Yeah.
And how oftentimes when those emotions come together, those are when those memories really get stick and made. It is part of the point that you get emotions coming together. And so I think joy it's joy and sadness that are the two kind of main characters in that movie. And sadness you can kind of count. Well, no, fear is a separate one in there, isn't it? But those things coming together often are the ways that we remember things. When one emotion changes so much to another, from fear to joy. And that's what Jesus is doing for us here. And I think that's good for us to know that even in the middle of fear, and even in the middle of sadness, joy can still be there. Joy is not exclusive. It's not like to have God's joy and peace means that all of the other emotions are gone. No, it means that what we know is more true than what we feel. What promises we know of forgiveness, of peace, that's there for us even when we're feeling all kinds of other things.
Yeah, and think about how down the disciples must have been. This is
their friend, their mentor.
This is the guy they gave up everything to follow for 3 years. And now it has been taken from them quickly. Mm-hmm. And they don't know what to do.
Yeah. They're going to get some direction really quick here in the next verse 9. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet, and they worshiped him. The word for greetings in Greek it comes from the word for joy. So it's like that's the way you greet people. It's kind of like saying "I'm happy to see you" or something like that. Is probably a good way of saying it, but it's the same word as rejoice. So Jesus greets them and says, "Rejoice." And they come up and they take hold of his feet and they worship him. And this taking hold of his feet, this is actually a really important thing, because it's one of two ways that you know that Jesus is really truly alive, right? He talks to them. He's got words to say, and he's got feet. He's not a ghost. He's not a hallucination. He's really there. He's really alive. That same body is alive. Those same feet that were nailed to the cross. You can touch him. You can see him. You can feel him. There it is for you right there.
Yeah. And that's the special thing about Jesus that we celebrate at Christmas, that he's there in the flesh, and here after his resurrection, he's still here in the flesh.
Yeah, a human body rising from the dead. This is a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. It's the beginning of the resurrection of all flesh, for all of us, and too. Let's go to 10.
Yeah. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." Yeah. So don't be, there he's saying he knows that they're still afraid. They've had quite the morning already, and he's saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of my enemies. Don't be afraid of those soldiers who are passed out. Don't be afraid that the disciples won't believe you. Just tell them this good news.
Yeah, and it's going to go along with what Jesus is going to say that evening when he appears to those disciples, where twice he is going to say, "Peace be with you," as he rises again from the dead. So when Jesus rises from the dead, here now fear is giving way to peace and joy. And again, go and do what I said, right? Go to Galilee. There you're going to see me. There we're going to have that time together, and that's going to be good. Yeah. Okay, so there it is. So there's Jesus appearing to these women. They saw it. They go back, and they tell them, the disciples, and it starts people on the path to believe. We'll talk about that too next week, and that'll be a good one to go through also. We get more. We get more here. Matthew is the only one who gives us what happens with the chief priests and the guards, which what happens there is just fantastic. Let's go on. Verse 11. So while they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place.
I never noticed that it was just some of the guard that went.
Some of the guard.
Yeah, like you can imagine these Roman soldiers like drawing lots to who's the one who has to go say what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you say? When you show up in front of these guys, what can you say but the truth to start off with? I mean, it's got to start there, right? Yeah. It's got to start with the truth that, okay, yeah. So, we saw an angel, the stone was rolled away. He's not in that grave anymore, guys. He's gone. What are we going to do about it? This is amazing too, because the chief priests and these guards, they have all the facts. They know for certain that Jesus has risen from the dead, and what we're going to see is that they're going to choose not to believe.
And that's the thing that unbelief does. You'd rather have things your way. You'd rather be right, even if it's worse. Mm-hmm. And they're so convinced that they're right that they're not willing to change.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, Lutheran Satire captured this in a great Easter video. We're going to put a link in the description below, and you should definitely check it out, called Epic Easter Unbelief, where they act out this scene. It's pretty good. I encourage you to take a look at that too.
Verse 12.
Yeah.
And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers.
Follow the money. Always follow the money.
And this is, you have to wonder what Nicodemus, what Joseph of Arimathea say to this,
followers of Jesus, but yet part of the council. What are they thinking? Because this is probably the first time they hear about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not the story Matthew's telling. It'd be great to get the meeting minutes for the minutes for this meeting, that they had to find out, what was proposed. And
I'm sure it was closed session. They didn't publish those minutes.
It's probably true. Probably true. And but yeah, I've heard there's a quote. I think Don Ohlmeyer, was a former bigwig at NBC, like there's a quote by him that's something like, the answer to all of your questions is money, like as to why something happens. And yeah, follow the money. You're right. Follow the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are they going to say? All right. So they tell the soldiers to say this. All right. They gather. They give the money to the soldiers and they say, "Tell people his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep." Yeah, right. While you were asleep, this is what happened. His disciples who remember, have been hiding in fear for their lives, who are like the least likely grave robbing crew. They came, they overpowered Roman soldiers and stole Jesus' body and left the grave clothes folded up neatly behind so that they could do this. And this all happened while we were asleep.
Yeah, and it's think about this. Well, who's the leader of the disciples is Peter, and their interactions that the leaders have had with Peter, where he starts throwing a sword around and slices a guy's ear off, and then he denies even knowing Jesus. So yeah, that's the guy who masterminded this grave.
Yeah, right. Really. No, that's not what's happening here. This is a conspiracy theory, right? This is a conspiracy theory, and this is the official conspiracy theory. And so, my goodness, we've got this today, and it's here it is again. We got stuff flying around, and nothing new under the sun, as Solomon says, right?
Yeah, here's verse 14. And if this comes to the governor's ears, the thing that you're all going to be telling everybody on our behalf, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So yeah, these are Roman soldiers, and the penalty for falling asleep on guard duty is death. So they're being paid enough money to claim that they did something that's punishable by death, and the chief priests have enough. They feel like they have enough political pressure on Pilate to make sure that nothing happens to these soldiers.
Yeah, and apparently it works, because here's what verse 15 says. So they took the money and did as they were directed, and this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. So money talks, right? And here money talks, and money can say the wrong thing very easily. And here's just one of the kind of explanations, because, all right, so there that week, nobody can deny there's an empty tomb. You can't deny it. Nobody, 50 days later on Pentecost, when Peter stands up and boldly proclaims that Jesus is risen from the dead, we're witnesses of this, and you killed him. It would be really easy for people to just go over to his tomb and open it up and say, well, no, he didn't rise from the dead. There's his body.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do that because the tomb was empty. And so people have given some kind of crazy explanations for why this has happened. So let's just go through a couple of these here, because these are, well, for one, they're really out there, and well, two, they're kind of funny, and three, they're actually really easy from what happened in the Bible to say that no, that's clearly not what happened. So this is one: the disciples steal the body theory, right? And not going to happen because, like we said, disciples are not in the state to do this at this point.
Yeah, the Roman soldiers are there. They were put there for a reason,
so that this wouldn't happen.
Exactly. And if they hadn't checked the tomb first, obviously they had to have checked the tomb first, because they put the seal on it to make sure it was shut, and the body's in. And so if they had overpowered the soldiers or something, that would be the story, not we were sleeping.
Right. Here's another one. It's called the wrong tomb theory, where you go to a cemetery and sometimes it's hard to find where someone's buried. So maybe instead of going to the tomb where Jesus was buried, they stumbled on another tomb that was empty because nobody had put it in there. And they came back saying, hey, Jesus' tomb is empty. He's alive again.
Yeah, well, that can't be, because Matthew is careful to say, hey, this is Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. a guy who the chief priests and the Sadducees, the Pharisees, they knew who this guy was. He was one of them, and so they knew where his tomb was. Maybe maybe theirs were close by. Their families' graves were close by, and so they tell the soldiers exactly where. This is the tomb. Guard this one.
And also, you have the women. Matthew clearly has pointed out back at the end of chapter 27 that the women were there when Jesus was buried specifically so they would know which tomb to go to on Sunday morning and finish the job. So that doesn't work. Okay. The wrong tomb theory. This is a great one. The swoon theory, it's called, where Jesus didn't really die on the cross. He passed out, fell unconscious. They buried him. And 3 days in the tomb, he got to recover a little bit and came out Sunday morning and said he was alive.
Yeah, and the Roman soldiers knew what they were doing when they were doing a crucifixion. They did them a lot.
Stick his spirit aside, make sure he's dead. That's what they did to Jesus, John says. And John says, I was there. I saw it. I saw the blood and water flow out of his side. He's really dead. Yeah,
and the blood and water, that's... it's the name of exactly what it is escapes me, but it's an actual medical condition that would happen when you died this way, and it completely lines up with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, how is somebody who's half dead, nearly comatose, going to push open that big stone? It's not going to happen. People are going to recognize this as something that is not going to happen right away. All right, last one, the hallucination theory. This is a more modern one. Those first three, the disciples stealing the body, the wrong tomb, and the swoon theory. Those are ancient. Like in the first couple centuries, people were saying that about Jesus not rising from the dead for those reasons. This one's a little bit more modern. I think it goes probably to the end of the 19th century or something like that, when psychology is starting to kind of take off. And the theory is that Jesus' disciples, including the women, had this hallucination of Jesus alive, and so that's what they proclaimed to the people who they saw and said that Jesus was risen from the dead. What's wrong with that?
Well, they grab hold of his feet. One of the other Gospels talks about how he eats fish. This is when you hallucinate. Even if there's a group of people hallucinating, they're not all hallucinating the same thing.
You don't have hallucinations.
Yeah.
Even if you're all doing mushrooms together or something like that, you're not all going to see the same thing.
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either. Right? So this is not what has taken place here. The best explanation for what has happened, just logically, is that Jesus rose again from the dead. Now, that's a big deal because that doesn't usually happen. That's a miracle. And the awesome deal is that God promises that, okay, because Jesus rose from the dead, guess what? You get to rise from the dead too.
Yeah. And one of the other theories that you'll hear people talk about today is they made it up. This whole thing has been made up. And that can't be the case, because what did the disciples gain from this? This early Christianity wasn't some sort of cult that we see today, where everyone's getting rich and
send me $100 and God will bless you, right?
Yeah, this is not that. This is sell your possessions, come live with us. We'll all live together and share everything,
so that we can give it to the poor, right?
And if we get persecuted, we might die.
And they were willing to do that, very willing to do that. They rejoiced because they were able to suffer with Christ in their persecution. Yeah. You don't do that unless you've seen something like this.
Yeah. And also, I heard recently another cool piece of evidence that I hadn't thought of before was they changed what day they worshiped on.
They did. For Jews who had this commandment to worship on the Sabbath, to start worshiping on the day after the Sabbath, oh man, that was a huge, huge shift. And apparently that happened rather flawlessly in the first century.
Yeah.
And so that even like Paul in Romans will say, okay, well, you esteem this day, no big deal, right? You worship on the day you want for for honoring the Lord. I mean, that to be able to say that instead of you got to worship on the Sabbath is crazy, mind blowing to an Old Testament Jew.
And and to add on that too, this is they put these stories, and we were talking about today how they're careful to add in the eyewitnesses. Say you can go talk to them, go talk to these people today. These Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written within years, and John might have been like a few decades later, but they were written pretty close to when the events happened, and you could go get that backed up from eyewitnesses who were there.
Paul specifically mentions in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus at one point after his resurrection appeared to 500 people. So you can go, Paul's writing 1 Corinthians 20 years or so after Jesus rose from the dead, 20, 25 years. So go talk to him. Some of them have fallen asleep. Some of them are dead now, but a lot of them, are still around, and you can still do that. My favorite piece is that, okay, so like in 1 Corinthians, Paul's got to, argue and has that whole chapter 15, explaining how Jesus rose from the dead and what that means for us. But around the same time, he writes the book of Romans, which is a congregation farther away, halfway across the Mediterranean. And he doesn't have to explain that Jesus rose from the dead. He just references it a number of times as if it's fact. They already believe this. No discussion. It's foundational to their faith. And he just then is able to spend that whole letter explaining what it means, what the benefit of is that Jesus is risen from the dead. That's an awesome thing to be able to look at and say.
Yeah, for sure. This really happened for us, and that means everything. It completely changes how your life works, because Jesus really rose from the dead. That means God is calling you to be part of his family, and that you get to live in that love.
If Jesus is risen from the dead, then nothing else matters. But if Jesus is not risen from the dead, then nothing else matters, right? That this is the new life that we have in Christ, the promise that we have going forward. All right. Well, Catechism Connection, obviously, again, this is a major part of the second article, Jesus rising from the dead, and the promise for that too.
The Gospels don't talk about him descending into hell. Is it one of the?
It's in, Peter talks about it in 1 Peter. That's probably the clearest text on that, where he goes through and lists out the things that, it's almost like the creed is just paraphrasing part of 1 Peter there, and including the Jesus descent into hell, which happens somewhere in there. The timing we're not 100% sure of. It just says after suffering that Jesus did that. And then, of course, also this plays into baptism too, because in Romans chapter 6, it talks about this specifically, that, okay, if Jesus is risen from the dead, then everyone who's been baptized into Christ, well, they've been baptized into his death, and we expect a resurrection just like his.
Yeah. This is the best news ever.
Best news ever. Best news ever. So I'm really excited that you guys get to share this good news with your families as you hear this, and hopefully this has been very helpful for you in doing that. God bless you as you do it. Thanks, Paul, for joining us.
Yeah, see you.